Hello everyone, today I am going to be discussing some animated cartoon shows that I like as well as dislike. Now I don't really have a strong, fervent uh, side when it comes to animated shows or animated cartoons really in general. I'm just kind of more in the like or dislike camp. Um, and it's not so much that I completely love or completely despise the shows. I'm just more of a like. I consider myself more in a like and dislike category, only based upon the show's quality, I guess you could say, at least in my opinion. Um, so I don't really hold a strong love or a strong hatred for certain cartoons. I find a lot of cartoons to be fairly enjoyable. See, the only problem with animated shows in particular with cartoons is that they don't really last all that long. And usually there's always something new coming out. So it's really hard for me at least to develop really an attachment with a lot of these cartoons because they just kind of come and go. The thing is I can't, just invest all my time just watching a dozen cartoons. Like it just would not be fun for me. So I choose not to fully absorb myself into, I guess, the cartoonisphere because it's not something um, that I guess really hold a lot of interest in. Again, I do love the old classic shorts and the various other things that cartoons have done in the past as well as today. But I'd say I like I think I have more of an attachment for films and for fairly iconic characters as opposed to just animated shows just in general, especially when they come and go, and it's hard to invest a lot of time in them. So without further ado, let me discuss some of them that some of which that I like and some of which that I dislike. Uh, so the first cartoon I wanted to briefly address is Avatar: The Last Airbender. This show, I think, does a really good job in executing its cliches. Now, again, the show does have the cliche, the chosen one, Aang. But what they do with that cliche, I think, really works to the show's advantage because you have a lot of different interesting tasks that Aang sort of has to go through throughout the show, and you kind of see his evolvement, and you see the evolvement of the other characters throughout the show, and then you become exposed to even more characters as time goes on. So it is a good show in how it executes its story and its characters, even though it is ultimately it has the main bulk of the show is focused in on this cliche of being the chosen one, so to speak. So, basically the show centers around Aang, in case anybody doesn't know, who ultimately has to defeat this, Fire Lord, I think they call him. And basically the Fire Lord is trying to take over all of these other areas, and all these other areas are focused in on understanding a particular element, whether it be earth, wind, fire, or water. And they know how to master these elements and use these elements, kind of like how superheroes know how to use their powers. The people know how to use their resource. So ultimately, Aang sort of has to master all of these elements in order to defeat the Fire Lord. And so that's basically what he goes through. He goes through all these various different areas and tries to figure, and along the way he has his friend companions and his other animal sidekicks, and they basically go off and they figure out how Aang can ultimately master all of these elements. Now again, that is a little bit cliche. We've seen this before with, like, a character going through various different trials and tribulations in order to ultimately accomplish a goal. We've seen this time and time again, but it's just the way that the show executes these particular cliches that makes it work, because you have engaging characters, you have engaging story, you have engaging twists and turns that the story sort of takes, and you have character involvement, and you see the various sides that people are on, whether it be on Aang's side or on the Fire Lord's side. And you ultimately see how Aang overcomes all of these obstacles that are thrown at him. So, really, it is focused in on being that kind of a show, and again, there's a lot of moral teachings and a lot of different kinds of things that the characters have to go through, and, the different trials and tribulations can be very relatable, I think, to a lot of people, and a lot of children in particular. So, it really has the foundation of a good kids show, and it also is a good show, I think, for adults too, because it's not really focused in on trying to just appeal to children, because there's a lot of adult concepts, there's a lot of there's a lot of complexity to the characters, and there's a lot of action. And the animation really works with that really well. So ultimately, it does have, I think, a lot to offer for children and adults, and it's very it's just very interesting in how it ultimately executes itself, and I think it works a lot for children and can work a lot for adults. So ultimately, that's all I think I can really say. It's just a good show with good animation, and even though it has cliches, it knows how to use those cliches. So, the next show that I'm going to be talking about is SpongeBob, and I'm not talking about the SpongeBob that's currently on now, and I'm only talking about the SpongeBob that is the movie and before. So all of the SpongeBob that was before the movie as a television series. I think that SpongeBob in particular appeals to children in a different way than Avatar does. As you can see, Avatar takes itself way, or as you could probably tell just by the titles, Avatar takes itself way more seriously than SpongeBob SquarePants does. And this really shows, but despite that, I think it's not really designed to be a moral guide for children. I don't think it's designed to be like this very serious, in-depth, show. It's just designed to make children laugh and make children let go of whatever issues that they may have. And I think SpongeBob was one of those shows, at least for me in my childhood, that was kind of just fun. Yes, it's not the most intellectual kind of comedy. Obviously not. I mean, it is a kids show. But I think overall it does a good job in being that kind of comedy-centered show and having sort of these outright ridiculous characters, having a crab who's obsessed with money, having a villain who's like so itty-bitty small, having the main character who's not really necessarily noble or heroic, he's just kind of eccentric and goofy, and that character being SpongeBob, and then having another character, Squidward, who's just kind of the Scrooge, and then Patrick, who's kind of just the dumb and naive one, and then Sandy being the feisty squirrel, who's definitely not in an environment that you would picture a squirrel to be in. So, again, the show really appeals to this idea of being just very humor-oriented and not trying to be so intellectual or trying to, develop something with this really in-depth story. It's just trying to be a cartoon show. It's trying to be just a simplistic, funny cartoon show. And I really feel that those few seasons that were at the beginning, where they had the original people who came up with the concept of SpongeBob, to work. However, I think after the movie was when the show started going downhill, because I don't think the original people that were part of SpongeBob were there anymore. I think, though, they're trying to see if they can make a second movie of SpongeBob, and then ultimately they would have the same creators come back and do the movie. So again, there might be some kind of hope there for the series, but like everything else, they always come to an end, these shows. So I don't really grow a huge attachment to them, I guess, because it's just like they just kind of just come and go, and so. But ultimately, I think still SpongeBob holds weight because it still was fun, and it still had this. It was really the first kids show to say, we're not going to take ourselves seriously, and it's okay that we don't take ourselves seriously. There's some other shows that I think have tried to do this, but I don't think any of them come to sort of the caliber that I think SpongeBob ultimately did. So I guess that's kind of just my reasoning. But I'm sure there's people who will disagree with me and say SpongeBob blah blah blah. But personally, I enjoy it. At least the beginning seasons. So you can take that for what it's worth. But I believe that's really all I can say about that show. Now the next show I'm going to mention is called Teen Titans, and yes, this show is somewhat more serious, again, like Avatar, and again, they have kind of a similar animation going on. But the interesting thing about Teen Titans is that I think it executes the characters well, and I think it executes the overall cliche aspect of the show well. And what I mean by that is that there's another kind of cliche formula going on here with Teen Titans, and that's the fact that they're superheroes, and that they're teenage superheroes. And they basically, throughout the show, are, going up against villains. They kind of have like a main villain that's their major antagonist, and then you have maybe smaller villains. It pretty much has this similar formula to like other, superhero shows that involve more than one superhero, like Avengers, other shows like I think the Justice League. It's a similar thing, except it's just teenagers. And the interesting thing is I think teenagers in particular appeal a lot to children because they are ultimately going into that next stage of life. And so I think a lot of kids identify with teenagers for some reason. I think kids actually look up more to teenagers, than they do adults for some reason. And I think that's just because they're closer to that next step within life, and they think that being a teenager is just so cool or whatever. So again, it does have that aspect for the show that works really well, and it also has some things that can appeal to adults and to children. It is a little bit darker, I'd say, in like its animation, and in its sort of stories, but it does have interesting characters. You do have the main lead, Robin, who is supposed to, I guess, be Batman's famous sidekick, who's sort of the forefront of the series because he's sort of the leader of the entire group. But I like how, too, it focuses in on the other characters, too, and you usually see throughout the episodes that it usually focuses on one character in particular and how it affects all the other characters that are involved. So I think, and again, in a sense, even though there is the ultimate purpose for them to come together and defeat a villain, there is still this kind of character focus that it takes. And I'm sure these other cartoon shows have done it too, but I think Teen Titans in particular was one that appealed to me because I think they took it from a more teenage-like angle, and then they added in some comedy. but I think this is definitely a more drama-centered show. But I think it really worked, and I think it works to for kids and for adults too. The only thing though is that there's apparently this other series that came after the Teen Titans series, the Teen Titans Go, which I think basically made them like miniature or something. And I don't know. I've heard like really bad things about that show. So I guess I would say just stick with Teen Titans, no Go at the end, just Teen Titans, and you'll probably enjoy just fine. So the next one that I wanted to briefly discuss is Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry, I think, is very appealing to watch for a couple of episodes. And what I mean by a couple of episodes is not a consecutive amount in, at least for me, in one day. The reason why is because it's pretty much the same exact thing throughout each episode. Tom and Jerry are fighting. That's every single episode. There's no change in the plot whatsoever. But regardless, the slapstick is fun. It's engaging. It's funny. It's interesting to see the kinds of things that they try to use in order to get the other one to, mess up. Like Jerry constantly messing up Tom, and then Tom trying to mess up Jerry. Again, it is this fun rivalry that they develop, and I think a lot of people enjoy the rivalry, and I would say I do enjoy the rivalry, and I do like that aspect of the show. I guess I would say that it's just not one of the shows that I can watch extensively for periods of time, because it just gets so old just seeing the same plot happen over and over again. So yeah, but ultimately I still think it's really enjoyable, and I remember watching it a lot when I was a child, and I think it can be interesting for children and as well as adults today, because it's fun. It's fun, and it knows how to execute slapstick. It's just for me personally, I like watching it once in a while. I don't like watching it consecutively. So again, this is why I kind of put these things in the like and dislike category. So the last like show that I'm going to talk about is Looney Tunes, and I mean the old Looney Tunes shows, like the ones with Bugs and Daffy, the ones with the Coyote and the Roadrunner, the ones with Porky Pig, all those characters. So I'm talking like probably 1950s Looney Tunes, not the current Looney Tunes shows. I haven't really watched those. But I remember the old school stuff, and I remember it being a lot of fun and very engaging and just interesting to see. And I remember they used to play a lot of the old shows, at least on some of the cartoon channels when I was a kid, and I enjoyed always watching them. So again, it's just one of those shows that has interesting characters and a fun, slapsticky kind of atmosphere. And I guess I would say that I liked Looney Tunes more than Tom and Jerry because, again, there was a lot more of a range. There was a lot more of a variety. There was a lot more characters. There was a lot more storylines. There were just a lot of different things going on. And I think there was a lot for people to choose from. And even though it kind of follows a similar kind of rivalry, I felt like the rivalries were at least a little bit more unique than Tom and Jerry's rivalry. But again, still an enjoyable show in the same sense of Tom and Jerry being very slapsticky and slapsticky oriented. Now to talk about the ones that I dislike. And I don't know what the reaction is going to be on the dislikes as well as the likes, but I'm just going to go out and say I never liked Dora the Explorer. I just did not appeal to me at all. I like the idea of trying to educate kids and trying to, I think that's something that Sesame Street does well, like with educating kids, because it involves a lot of different things. Um, but Dora's just plays out like a video game. Um, because she'll say something like in the form of a question, and then she'll go, "You're right," and the medium that this show tries to take up itself in, being an animated show, just does not work. This can work as a video game. This can work as a book, but this does not work as a television show. In a television show, you need some kind of storyline, something actually going on, and some obstacle to go through. You just can't just throw education up there and expect people to actually be invested in such a show. And to be honest, it just really tired me. It just really just drained me from just like how just overly simplistic the show was. And I understand it's supposed to be for little kids, but you don't need a show to show your kids education. Shows aren't, I think, supposed to be designed to be. I mean, they can be educational, but you have to do it in an entertaining way. And the thing is I don't think Dora the Explorer really executes it in a entertaining way. I think it's just very dull and just smiley and just 2 + 2, and then what is that? And then just having the child answer, and who knows, maybe the child answered wrong, and then she'll go like, "You're right, good job," and it's like, no, this does not work. This does not work in this medium. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. So I just don't care for the show at all. And the first time I thought of it, the first time I thought of an opinion of it, even when I was a little bit younger, I still thought that it was a really uninteresting concept, and doesn't really work, and doesn't hold a lot of ground and weight. Just because you're trying to provide education doesn't necessarily mean that you're an educated show. And I don't think Dora the Explorer really is an educated show. So, with that being said, that's, I think, all I can say about that one. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about that I dislike is it's a very dumb show. The characters are just overwhelmingly dumb. And the problem with this show is that the characters really take up the central plot of the story. They really are the center focus. And that's a huge problem when they're obnoxious and annoying and, and stupid at the same time. When you mix annoying, obnoxious, and stupid together, it doesn't work. See, the reason why Patrick Star works is that he's still very likable even though he's dumb. These guys are just really annoying, overly obnoxious, and they just don't know how to be quiet for a couple of minutes. And actually say something that's coherent and displays a little bit of intelligence. And that show is Fanboy and Chum Chum. I've seen a couple of episodes. I think my brother was initially watching the show, and I was just blown away by how dumb it was. It was just really, really dumb. Just completely obnoxious characters. And the characters are Fanboy and Chum Chum. So, yeah, that's their names. Fanboy and Chum Chum. Fanboy kind of makes sense because, again, he's dressed sort of as a superhero. Chum Chum I don't get. Is it because he's the overweight one? Is it because he's chubby? Chum Chum? I don't know. I just felt like it was just a really dumbly executed show, and it didn't seem like that the animators really knew what they were doing, because again, the animation's pretty bad on this show too. So again, just doesn't work. Just doesn't have any likability going for it, at least for me. So I'd say that's one that I don't particularly care for. Now the next one is called The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. Now this is another one that's kind of in a dumb category, at least for me. At first I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of trying to be like SpongeBob a little, right? And then I literally watched it, and after a couple of episodes, I'm like, I can't watch this anymore. This is just so overly obnoxious and completely ridiculous and just way too over the top. Almost kind of the humor is just kind of gross too. I mean, SpongeBob did have some like kind of gross humor gags a little, but this takes it to a whole other level. Just like you just don't, and the thing too is this is not even funny in how it's executed. It's just completely, the thing is too is the characters I don't think are that likable. You know, Flapjack I think is just completely too much out there, and you know, there's just not a whole lot that the show has going for it. And I think this was one in particular that a lot of people disliked. And yeah, I can see why. This just kind of just doesn't work. It would work better had there been another person maybe behind the script and behind the animation, but it just didn't work for me all that much. Now the last one that I'm going to be briefly discussing is Doug. I always found Doug to be a dull show. Like, even as a kid, I thought it wasn't that interesting. I always thought the character reactions, again, were completely ridiculous. I guess, I don't know if I was really exposed to the different ones. I don't know if some people claim that the Nickelodeon one was so much better or whatever. But I just thought that the character Doug was just dull, and everybody else in the show I thought was pretty flat. There's nothing that I felt like I could get invested in. So unlike the last two that I mentioned, that just involved sheer stupidity, and then Dora the Explorer and trying to involve education but not doing it in an interesting or clever way. Doug fails in the sense, I think, of just being dull. Like, I just didn't find it all that interesting. I did not find myself getting invested into anything that was going on. So, it wasn't really a show I think that I really found myself really enjoying. So, but ultimately, I think that's really all I can say. I'm sure there's a lot of other shows that I would put myself into the like category. I just never, I think, really exposed myself and ultimately remember the shows that I really watched as a kid, because again, they kind of just came and went and they didn't really stay for that long. So it was really hard to really get invested into one particular show. So ultimately, though, I think that's really all I can say in regards to this topic. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody.